sellers have heard that buyers using VA loan for financing come with certain red tape and disadvantages when compared to other buyers using different types of financing. And today I'm here to dispel those myths and talk about why, when you're selling a house, you should not be afraid of VA loans. Rumors that VA loans are difficult to deal with and take longer to close have given this program a bad rap. For those that don't know, a VA loan is a type of financing reserved for veterans and active duty military. It's an awesome program that allows those who have served our country to take advantage of the joys of homeownership without necessarily having to have a down payment. They can even have more flexible qualifications, and sometimes they even get better mortgage rates. What you need to know is that while VA loans are backed by the government, they're not issued from the government. You're going to be dealing with the same private lending institutions and banks that you would be dealing with if you accepted another offer with financing. The perception about VA loans that you often hear is they take longer to close, they cost the seller more money, and they require the seller to do a lot more work. Here's what you need to know. According to an article this year from veteran.com, they reported that on average, VA loans take 40 to 50 days to close. And keep in mind, that's the average. I have worked with many VA loans in the past on both sides of the transaction, and I've seen them close in 35 days, sometimes even less. It really all comes down to your team. If you've got the right agents, if you've got the right lender, things can go smoothly and get done very quickly. And let me tell you, I would take a 40-day VA loan that goes smooth the entire time rather than a 20-day conventional financing that's a complete dumpster fire the entire time. Now, VA loans do require a certain minimum standard for the condition of the home. It's nothing crazy, but they do require a certain minimum standard of habitability. The basic criteria is that it needs to be safe, sound, and sanitary. These are what are called the MPR, or the minimum property requirements. Things like mechanical systems need to be safe to operate, like a working air conditioner and a safe furnace. No sign of leaks in basements and crawl spaces. No sign of termites, dry rot, or fungus growth. Adequate heating systems and adequate roofing. And no lead-based paint. And if there's evidence of lead-based paint, it has to be remediated prior to closing. I think what gets a little bit gray is these aren't really super specific criteria. Someone's definition of sanitary or adequate roof may vary from another. So I think sometimes VAs get a bad rap because they're not always crystal clear. In my experience, if you've got a roof that is leak-free and has several years of life left on it, if you've got a house that's clean with no broken windows, the appliances work, and you've got a working and functional water heater and air conditioning that have a few years of life left, generally you're okay. It's when you're looking at really dilapidated properties that you're gonna find a lot of issues may come through with the financing. So it just depends on the kind of house you have, what condition it's in, and what you're willing to do. It's a conversation that you need to have at the beginning of your listing, not once you're under contract on a VA loan. I will say, the one thing that is really big and very specific are any kind of WDO issues, wood destroying organisms. So think wood rot, fungus, any kind of dry rot or termite evidence. There has to be absolutely none in order for a VA loan to close. So if there is a postage stamp size of wood rot on the back porch, you have to have it fixed prior to closing. Again, review your property, review its condition, and determine with your agent what you're willing to do or not, and that will help you determine whether you want to review VA offers. When I meet with sellers who are wanting to list their home, we're always talking about the types of offers that they're willing to review. And when VA offers come up, there's usually a little bit of trepidation and hesitation. But what I like to tell my sellers is this: if the condition of the property is such that it's gonna meet those minimum requirements for VA, which for the most part, unless you're trying to sell a major fixer-upper, there's a standard of homes that we like to sell because you're gonna get the most money and you're gonna sell it in the least amount of time, then I really don't see any issues concerning VA financing, and at the very least reviewing those offers and maybe even accepting one if the terms are strong. It opens up your buyer pool to a completely separate demographic that you might otherwise miss, and many of these closings can be super smooth. It's all based on the property. If I'm looking at a property that's got a ton of issues or a seller who isn't willing or isn't able to do any kind of repairs, then VA may not necessarily be the option. But otherwise, it's something I always recommend taking a look at. The final thing to consider are the lending standards for VA loans. They're actually a little bit more forgiving. In order to help out veterans and those who serve our country, they actually have a lower qualification for lending standards. They're more flexible on credit scores, and they also may allow higher debt-to-income ratios. This means that if you're looking at two similar borrowers, one with VA and one with conventional financing, the VA borrower may have a better chance of being approved for their loan because their guidelines are not as strict as the other types of financing. So if it's me, I would much rather work with a VA buyer who is well within the limits of their financing guidelines than with a conventional one who just barely squeezes in. Bottom line, if your property's in pretty good shape, don't be scared of VA buyers. It's a really amazing program, and I promise it's not as scary as some agents would have you believe. Just be sure that you're vetting the agents and the lenders really well, because that's gonna help guarantee a smoother closing. And yes, I understand, not every single VA loan is gonna be rainbows and unicorns, but let me tell you, I've worked with VA, I've worked with cash, I've worked with FHA, I've worked with conventional, I've worked with USDA, I've worked with other special loan programs, and every single one of those categories, I have unicorn and rainbow stories, and I also have nightmare stories. So don't let one particular rumor ruin your chances at getting the right buyer for your home. If you've still got questions about VA loans, whether you're a buyer or a seller, I want to help provide you with some clarity. So let me help you navigate what VA loans are all about. And if you're a veteran, here's everything you need to know. I'm Lindsey Johnson, your resource for all things real estate. See you next time.